Hello, my name is Shelby Rodriguiz, and I am a history major at FTCC.
Shelby, can you tell me a little bit about your background, what you knew about civil rights or African American activism prior to the Selma trip?
That is an excellent question. So, coming from Texas, I had very little background. I would say that I have known about Martin Luther King Jr. and his mission, but I didn't know the ins and outs of what it takes and what was actually happening at the time. On this trip in Selma, I learned that there is a lot more to it than just having a speech and being passionate about a movement. We learned about others that were involved, like Joanne Bland, who was on the bridge in Selma, and hearing her story was amazing. One thing that she touched on was the after effects of the bridge and how her PTSD was something that she had to work through. Mental health isn't talked about a lot, and the basis of the whole civil rights movement was very hard mentally and physically. So for her to talk about that was something very eye-opening, and made me realize that I had not had enough exposure and knowledge about the civil rights movement.
And in what ways did actually meeting these people and going to these sites impact you maybe differently than just reading about these things in a textbook or a monograph?
Well, the connection between someone in person is always going to be different than reading about it in a book. The amount of emotion that you hear in their stories, it's not just, I hate to say, when you're reading it in a textbook, you can't connect it to an actual human life. But when you see it in person, you can see them for who they are, what they stand for, and what their movement was for.
Were there any of the sites, the museums, the physical spaces that you visited that really struck you?
Yes. So my roommate Paula was my go-to person at the Legacy Museum, because once we moved to the holograms, that was probably something that I didn't expect. Once you walk into the Legacy Museum, they give you a brief breakdown of the Atlantic slave trade, how it happens, where the points and places are, and what those people were going through. But then you move through the room and you see the actual artwork. You see women who have ran away with bells on, welded collars that will be connected to their children. This was something that impacted me right off the bat. But then you move on and you see these holograms of women talking about being separated from their children, men talking about being separated from their families. What made me cry the most, and where my roommate kind of had to hold me, was the songs that they were singing. You would think that they would sing songs to bring up their spirits, but it was singing in a way that was therapeutic, but also devastating.
Shelby, if you were telling kids, the new generation, kind of what your experiences have taught you from this trip and these places that you visited, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a heavy one. Well, I will say that from this trip, I have thought about going to law school, because I think it's important to stand up for people who may need a voice in the public, and learn as much as you can and critically think about what you're hearing.